So here we have Stephen Thwaites, and he is going to spend the next hour or so giving us Puppet demos. So with that, I will turn it over to Stephen.
So my name's Stephen. I'm a solutions engineer at Puppet Labs. I'm based out of London, and I'm here just to do a handful of Puppet demos for you. I know we've got a broad range of experience in the room with Puppet, so we're just going to start off with the basics and kind of move on to something a bit more interesting. And it's all going to be done in an environment that's built using Puppet Enterprise. So I've got the current GA version of Puppet Enterprise on here. Unfortunately, I can only show what's on the truck, so none of the 3.4 stuff is here yet to show you. I can certainly answer some questions if you have them. But we're just going to start with some basics around Puppet and layer on the complexity in some different use cases. So I know some of you are going to, are evangelists for Puppet in your own organization. I know you probably have your own ways of explaining Puppet when you do meet people who are new to the technology. So this is how I kind of go about it when I'm explaining it to people. So as Luke was saying this morning, it's really about defining an end state for your systems and then enforcing that end state on your systems. And we can rely on Puppet not just to understand our definition of what a system should look like, but we can also model it for us and report it back. So that's where I'm going to start. I can ask Puppet to tell me about the root user on this system. Sorry about the resolution on here. Can you see it? Can you all see it at the back, by the way? Is it all clear enough? Great. So I can ask Puppet to tell me about the root user on this system, and it's going to, what we call, introspect that system. It's going to return the state of that particular resource in Puppet DSL. And as we can see here, we've got one example. We've got the, it's a user. That's the type of resource that it is. We've got, it's the root user. That's the instance of that type on this system. And then we've got a bunch of key value pairs which describe how that user is configured on this system. So that is valid Puppet DSL. That's what Puppet code looks like. I can actually pipe that out into a file now. And I can keep that. And let's just say that that is the desired state for my system. Things are as they should be. Okay, so that's captured. If I just cat that out, just to be sure, this is exactly as the system is right now. And I'm going to go ahead and make a few changes to that system. Okay, so I'm going to change the shell. Let's change it to SH for a laugh. And then let's change the password for the root user as well to a bad one. Okay. So again, here on the left, we've got our desired state, let's say. And here on the right now, I'm going to ask Puppet the same question again, Puppet resource user root. So ask it to return the state of the root user as it is now. Okay, so you can see this is live information. We've got on the left here the way it was a moment ago, and now we can see that the shell has changed. We've got a different hash for the password. Okay, but because we've captured that state, we can get Puppet to do what it's good at, and that's converging with the desired state for the system. So I can ask it to Puppet apply the root user, the root PP, that's the captured state here. And I'm going to ask it to do it in no-op mode. Okay, so no-op mode is the simulation mode that's built into Puppet. So it's going to compare both the desired state and the current state, determine if there are any differences, and then talk about what it would do, like a what if it was going to converge those two states for me. Okay, so in and amongst this, we can see it did its work quickly, but it's come back and it said the current value is sh for the shell, should be bash. We knew that. And it's noticed that there's a password, and it would have triggered some changes as a result. Okay. So if I'm happy for it to do that, I can just disable this flag for no-op mode, and it's fixed that for me. It's now taking it from the current state to the desired one again. So we're now back in compliance, as we say. Okay, and because Puppet is just about an end state, it's not really a script. I can just repeatedly run this, and it's just going to keep checking that the desired state is in as it should be. Okay, and this is how typically Puppet runs. Puppet's an agent that runs on a system and continuously in contact with a master providing its desired state. So it's going to be normally running in this state to kind of keep the system in compliance. That's a really simple example of Puppet code. Slightly more sort of one up from that is about how we actually really combine multiple resources and to be attached to a single system or multiple systems. So this is kind of the quintessential example here, what we call the trifecta, a package resource that's configured by configuration file served by Puppet, and Puppet's also managing the service associated with it, okay? So let's start with the package. We can see we're not talking about, install this package. We're saying it is installed, and if it's not taken care of, we want Puppet to fix that for us. So the package is installed. We've got a file that we've got a bunch of permissions for that's being served from the Puppet master as well. It's acting as a file server for this file resource. And we have the SSHD, and we're going to make sure it's always running and that it's enabled to run at boot. Not only that, we also have these what we call meta parameters, which are kind of there to define precedents and relationships between resources in Puppet. So we're saying here that the service is subscribed to the configuration file, so that any changes to the configuration file bring about a refresh on the service so the change takes effect. And here we can see we're handling the package before the configuration file, because that's just sense. So that's kind of Puppet in an isolated sense. I was working with Puppet interactively on a single system just then. But more typically, Puppet is running in an agent-server kind of architecture. And this is how it kind of looks in Puppet Enterprise. Okay, so we've got a lot of the components you're probably used to seeing with open source here, but also a couple of others thrown in. This is kind of a different version of the slide that Luke was showing this morning about what happens during a Puppet run. And I just want to show this to you to show you the interaction between the components in PE. So as you can see, we've got a Puppet agent installed on every system, and that Puppet agent also includes mcollective, which is there for parallel execution and some orchestration. And these dark purple boxes towards the top are the centralized components in Puppet. So these are, can be deployed by the installer from Puppet and upgraded by the installer in Puppet. But these can be distributed and scaled out separately for very large installations. Now basically what happens during a Puppet run, we have this, the agent is invoked in some way, and that can happen in multiple ways. So you can invoke it interactively, as I was a moment ago. It can be invoked using mcollective from the command line, and also through the console, and I'll show you some of that shortly. But when the Puppet agent begins, it starts by gathering facts, a whole bunch of inventory about the system it's running on, and it sends that to the Puppet master. Okay, and that information can be used both to identify the system and make some kind of decisions about what configs can be applied, or the data in those facts can be reused in the config files. For example, using a listening IP address into a config file for a web service. So the Puppet master takes that and it queries, the previous talk was talking about ENCs, it queries a service to determine what classes should be applied to a system based on its identity. And in this case, that is being performed by the Puppet Enterprise console. Puppet Enterprise console is the ENC built into Puppet Enterprise. The answer comes back, and the Puppet master will compile the configuration for that system. You end up with this, what we call the catalog, being sent back here. And the agent uses that as a reference to begin converging the end state with the system. Finally, when that process is complete and all of the resources are hopefully now compliant, the report gets sent back to the master about every resource under management, and then that is forwarded on to a database service, PuppetDB. Actually, it's a web service in front of the database which handles Puppet reporting. So the Puppet master service usually runs the Puppet agent because it's managing itself, why not? And it has the mcollective there on the master as well, so you can perform those centralized operations that I'll be showing you soon. PostgreSQL is typically deployed in Puppet Enterprise as part of the installer, and that serves as the database for both the Puppet Enterprise console and PuppetDB. And of course, we bundle a CA, because all of this is encrypted through SSL encryption. And just calling out here to the right, I know we've been talking a bunch today about it being best practice to keep your Puppet modules and Puppet code in a version control system. And this is really just calling out Git here as the common example for version control with Puppet. So this is, you typically be checking out your version controlled modules onto your master in order to have your end states available to it. So often when I show people Puppet code, they go, well, that's great and everything, but I've got a complex application. I have a whole bunch of middleware, etc., that I need to configure. Do I need to model all of that myself? And the answer is sometimes. I have to deal with some of that myself, but we have a whole bunch of tooling that makes that easier. We've got, for example, linting tools in Puppet Lint that will check your syntax, etc. We've also had at Puppet Labs the Geppetto project. I don't know if everyone's seen this. This is an Eclipse-based IDE, which makes it somewhat easier to kind of pick up and work with the Puppet DSL. So here it's just picking up on a couple of common mistakes. I've got terrible typing accuracy, so things like fixing my commas or fixing my fat-fingered spelling mistakes and things like that are all catered for in this. There's actually some quite neat integration with things like the Puppet Forge and Puppet DB for working with the actual failures in Puppet runs to help you to debug. So we have that. In addition, we do, of course, have the Puppet Forge. Does anyone here have modules on the Puppet Forge? I know one or two of you do. Great, good for you. It's fantastic. So yeah, we've got 2,700 Puppet modules on the Puppet Forge here. Okay, and they cover really common use cases for Puppet, and we've actually, it started really broadening out now, even some Windows modules for handling things like Windows features and IIS. And of those 2,700 odd, we've got about, I think about 80 or so in the Puppet Labs namespace on there. But we also have a group of supported modules. So when you're a Puppet Enterprise customer, you get support for these modules. And these cover a lot of the core tech, really, that's in Puppet Enterprise, but also a bunch of ones that our customers are requesting that we support for them. So things like PostgreSQL, Tomcat, NTP, etc. Okay? And we can actually use this. We can pull these straight down onto our Puppet master and get working with them immediately. In fact, let's do that right now. So the Puppet Module Tool, or PMT as it's called, is a utility that's always running on a Puppet master. You can just use this to interface directly with the Puppet Forge API. So I can run this command to install the NTP module from Puppet Labs. So this is a ported module. It's going out, hitting the API, hopefully, if the Wi-Fi is being kind. And it's going to do some dependency resolution if there's any other modules that it depends on, and then download that to my master so I can start making use of it. Let's see if it does that. Yay. Just take a few seconds. If everyone could turn off their phones just to make this work, that'd be great. I'm kidding. We're nearly done. Okay, great. So you can see that the NTP module's now installed, and that depended in a standard library module from Puppet Labs as well, and it's actually handled all the dependency resolution, installed that onto my master for me. So I don't need to start modeling NTP for my systems. I can just make use of these modules immediately. So let's do that. I can go here to the Puppet Enterprise console. So this is, make it a little smaller here. So this is the ENC service and graphical user front end that's included with Puppet Enterprise. And if I can log in. Okay, I'm in, great. So this is the home screen. It's a little compressed because of the resolution, but this is kind of the home screen for Puppet Enterprise when you log in. You get a kind of general health view of all your systems, so some nice graphs. We've got a big green blob here, which is a good sign. Everything's already compliant on my systems that I'm running here. And I've got, a little smaller, that's better. And we've got this radiator view, so you can have this up in your NOC, for example, if you want to have that shown to everyone. And I've got a whole bunch of systems up and running here on my Mac that I can configure, and I can start making use of the Puppet Enterprise console. So it's the two main functions, I think, in the Enterprise console are really around classification and the configuration of nodes, and also the reporting element as well. So because I've just downloaded the NTP module, I can start adding this class into the console for me to use, because you may have a ton of classes that aren't all entry points into the module, so I'm just going to import the one that I need. So I can pull in NTP here, and add that in, and now that's ready for me to use. So I can now go and create a node group. let's just call this NTP. And add the NTP module to this group, and then add a bunch of systems. Okay, let's do CentOS as well. And let's do a Debian host, okay? Now, one of the neat things about some of these, especially these supported modules, is they have broad operating system support. This is the apt module, but you can see we handle both Ubuntu and Debian, or in case of VCS repo, we'll have broad operating system support so that we can actually run it on many different operating systems and handle the subtle differences between them. So I can actually assign this class to multiple different operating systems, and it should work. So what I've got here is the NTP class. I can actually edit parameters here in the console too. So if I want to specify some NTP servers, I can even put a structured data in here. So I can say, let's say DE pool NTP org, and let's do UK. That's where I'm from. Okay, and then all the systems that use this group will also, all the systems in this group will also use those parameters with this class to get the NTP service configured. Okay, so I hit create there, and then that's done. So I've bound those modules and those classes with those parameters to those 3 nodes. Okay, so next time Puppet runs on those systems, and normally we'd be waiting every half an hour for those things to check in, they should get the NTP config. But we don't have that kind of time here, so I'm going to head back over here to show you some mcollective. So mcollective is used in the context of sort of parallel execution and some orchestration, and it's included in the Puppet agent and the Puppet Enterprise installer for all of the centralized components too. So MCO has a bunch of, let's actually change the user here. Let's do over to PE admin that has permission. Great, okay, so again, a bit compressed here on my screen, but you can see we've got a bunch of Puppet functionality and just some basic filtering that can be done as well around which nodes you want to talk to. So I can say MCO ping, and actually they all reply. Everything that's on the fabric is all checking in, all of those nodes that are on that home screen in the Enterprise console a minute ago. And I can just reach out to individual nodes, so I can start to use rules about who I want to talk to. Solaris, for example, my Solaris system just gets back to me because I want to talk to just that one. So it's using a message queue, and it's reaching out, and it's like a publish-subscribe mechanism. So you're reaching out to just a filtered group of those hosts, and they get in touch. So that's like ping. That's like so what. So we can do something a bit more interesting there. Maybe do something a bit more intelligent than just on a host name, for example, because in places like Amazon, you don't really get sensible host names or instance IDs. We can actually do it based on those facts, okay? We can filter. So we can say, I just want to talk to the Red Hat family hosts, okay? And then those will all get back as well, okay? So this becomes the basis that, with which I can start to sort of orchestrate Puppet operations, okay? So if I run over here, I've got my 2 CentOS systems that I just classified, okay? And I can just open up the syslog on those, okay? So they're sitting there like that, okay? And unless Puppet's run in the last, 3 minutes since I classified those systems, they should still be waiting for their NTP config. So I can say MCO Puppet run once on that system, just ad hoc, right? Using the filter, so where filter OS family is Red Hat. Okay, so these are Red Hat derivative systems, so it should be reaching out to both of them. Okay, and you can see now both the top and bottom one there have been hit out in the environment. So they've just performed their Puppet run. It'll only take a few seconds to complete, so they're just being finished. So both finished there in 1.7 seconds. And we're back. So you can see NTP kicking in on those systems too. So those are both configured. I haven't had to write any Puppet yet, incidentally. Okay. So over here now, that system's configured. If you look now, you can see that it's actually reused the data I put in the console here. So that array of values was used to populate the template that was used in the NTP module to configure NTP on that system. So I'm just being able to use that kind of grouping and the node classification there to pass data down into Puppet. And this is the area that's going to kind of get a bit of an overhaul in the next version. You saw the node manager that was being mentioned this morning by Luke, and that's really going to just make this a more powerful process. So you'll still have this ENC service. Here I was making a kind of arbitrary bunch of a grouping of systems just by putting them in individually. But the new node manager is much more about using rules to do that. So anything that presents itself with certain facts, for example, or anything that uses based on a regular expression for its host name, much like you can do in a node definition file now. So back in the console, I should be able to look back at these list of nodes, and you can see we've now got reports back, okay, because they're now in PuppetDB. This console is using PuppetDB for its reporting. So you can see both the CentOS systems that I just ran Puppet on now have a different colored check against them, and that means that it's changed, that something happened in the last Puppet run. So I can whiz into that report there. You can see some basic metrics about what's been going on in that host, how many things have changed, how many total resources are under management, how long the whole process took, and some metrics about how that's broken down as well, which can be useful in understanding the profile of your Puppet run. So we have that. Back here as well, I mean, it's not just about handling classification. We can also handle certificate signing. So if we've got any new nodes using the frictionless installer, like Puppet, like Luke was saying this morning about being able to install Puppet using a kind of a bash script that just gets curled and installs everything, contacts the Puppet master first time, you'll just see them handled here. So instead of having to go over to the console and certificate sign or enable auto sign or something like that, you can do that through this console interactively. And of course, this console is, it's an enterprise tool, so we have some role-based access control in here as well. So we can decide based on an LDAP group or Active Directory group, what kind of permissions you have to this console, whether you can see everything, whether you can read or write, or if it's just read-only. So I can do a slightly more interesting example, I think. Let's head back. So rather than just NTP like a base build config sort of thing, I can do something. Let's install some software, so like some middleware and an application. So quite a popular one, Tomcat. So I'm inviting these classes into the enterprise console. I'll do Jenkins as well. Okay, and actually one more. I'm just going to flip my repositories to work offline, so I'm not waiting on that internet connection I had to a minute ago. So I'm going to add those classes into the console, build out another group. Okay, so down here, build another group. Jenkins CI. So I'm running it offline, just to change my repos. I'm going to install Tomcat. I'm going to install Jenkins as well. Okay, I'm not going to edit the parameters this time. And I'm going to install it on my CentOS node, my CentOS A node, for example. Okay, and then we're done. So whereas before I was logging, I was actually working on the PE master and actually invoking mcollective that way in order to reach out to nodes. This is actually also embedded in the console here. So we have this live management functionality. This is kind of where the mcollective is kind of pushed up into sort of the user land, so you can use it in a kind of more interactive way to both invoke Puppet and also to browse resources between systems. So in the same way as before, I can look at all the systems I've got here, but if I have a lot of them, I can filter them, for example, based on the name. Like with the wildcard, for example, if I have a ton of them. Or I can do something more advanced by specifying a fact. We've got some common fact names in here as well we can use. But again, I'll just do the same again. OS family, Red Hat again. Let's pick up the same. And you can see here, it's not just those two CentOS nodes. It actually is also going to pick up my master system as well, because it's using a Red Hat derivative to be installed on that. And I can, I can compare these systems too. So I can get live data back from how they're set up. So using these kind of base resource types in Puppet, I can inspect these systems side by side. So I can go to look at the users, for example. I can query the users on these systems. Okay, these are very similar. Let's reset that filter, get some variation into this. So 3 different distributions of Linux. There we go. You've got some different variation on users here. Let's just pick up the games user, for example. And we're showing them side by side. So this is live data. This isn't based on anything in PuppetDB or anything like that. This is actually, this is coming from mCollective reaching out to the systems, running a Puppet resource query and then returning the results. So I can see these side by side. You could see this being used in the context of a known working system and a busted one. So you could take, put the users side by side if someone's complaining they're not getting the right user experience, or if you have a bunch of, if you have a new security vulnerability and you want to check on what package versions are installed across systems, you can do this to query your systems interactively. But in this case, I'm just going to run Puppet on one system. So I can just select this here and go to Control Puppet. And I have all of these mCollective options exposed to me. So I can splay these, I can run them in stages, etc. But I'm just going to run it nice and simple. Meanwhile, I'm just going to look at the log on that system. Hopefully, we should have to see the same thing happening again. So again, that's gone out across the network, invoked the Puppet agent. It's sent facts. It's got its catalog. It's working on enforcing that config. So here we've got, we're installing packages. We're changing firewall rules. We're starting services. And when this process is done, we should have a functioning Tomcat server. So let's just go here. Let's check out on Jenkins. It's not done yet, but it should be shortly. Go gadget. All right. Great. Finished catalog run. So let's refresh that. It shouldn't be far off done. Yeah, great. Right. So that's gone out there and actually, I combined a bunch of modules together in the console, and this can be used, these kind of grouping methods can be used to build out this kind of roles and profiles method of assigning classes to systems. So you end up building up these stacks. They're completely reusable. You can reuse them with different types of data and being repurposed across environments. Yeah, and that was an end-to-end run, and all of that was being done through the graphical user interface using reusable modules available through the Forge. So last few moments here in the console. So we now got that report back to, a bit more interesting now, a bit more detailed. More things have changed. We've seen firewall rules, etc. change. We also got this other view. So we have, this is useful in the context of me going up and seeing what's happened just now, because this is the most recent report for every system. This is the systems at the top of my list. So it's useful in a browsing context. However, if you actually want to do a bit more kind of detailed information, or if you're looking to get to important information, imagine a situation in which you had an outage 4 hours ago or something like that. You want to know if there was anything important that changed on a particular system, and we have this event inspector for that. So PuppetDB has this very deep API that's got it's very there's lots of different ways of getting at the data inside Puppet through that, and we are using it in this interface to be able to filter different. Filter the data by looking at it from different angles. So I can go back here 6 hours, for example, just looking at what's been changing in the console, and you can see here, I've got which classes have been changed, which nodes have been changed, which resources have been changed. So you could say that in the last 6 hours, well, show me the nodes with failures, or show me the nodes with changes, for example. Okay, and right down to the resource level, I can break it down this way. So you can imagine a situation in which, I think Luke gave the example this morning, where you've got you've got 1,000 nodes out in your environment, you've got 100 of them with a failure on, they're all just showing red. So show me that one resource which is causing a problem on them, and this is the way in which you can do that. So here I can see that I've got lots of changes here on this node. What changes were they? You can see Tomcat 6 was installed. You get the whole timestamp, you get traceability right back to the manifest and line in that manifest where that change was applied. So that's the demos that I wanted to show you today. We've been through kind of working through Puppet interactively, resource introspection, classes, an introduction to the console, assigning parameters through the console, using the Puppet module tool, working with them interactively, and then building out something and working through the console to use the live management functionality. Are there any questions about PE? Yes?
The data is stored within the PuppetDB you said. Is it stored in the community version in the PuppetDB 2, or is it only an enterprise feature?
Sure. So the question was about where that data lives. You mean the parameters that I was using, for example?
All event data.
The event data is in PuppetDB. That's correct. Yeah. So
Enterprise feature, or is it?
so PuppetDB is open source. We're using the latest version of it, or the latest stable version of it in PE at any time. So each feature release of Puppet we have, which is approximately every quarter, will contain the stable state-of-the-art of each one of the Puppet projects. So PuppetDB contains your, for every machine under management, your facts, your catalogs, and your reports. That information is available through the API. The only enterprise-only functionality that I've shown you in terms of that accessing that data was the way in which it was being presented through the console. So it was obviously a PE installation of it, so it was all an automated install and things. But actually getting at that data is available through the PuppetDB API, which is documented on the Puppet Labs docs site. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So, so Puppet Enterprise
Can you
is a.
just repeat the question?
Oh yes, of course. Sorry. The question was about licensing for Puppet Enterprise. So Puppet uses PuppetDB, in fact, to determine how many licenses are in use. I think it takes something like a 14-day average of the active nodes in the PuppetDB database. And and it's a subscription-based license per node. There's no kind of Puppet server license and different Puppet agent licenses. Everything is just a node in terms of the licensing. And you get a slightly different price based on whether it's standard support or premium support. And we do discounts for sort of multi-year discounts, and the higher you go in volume when you buy it. But for example, if you burst out into Amazon for testing or something like that, and you want to purge the database of nodes that are now been destroyed, that's completely possible. They are completely reusable as licenses. And incidentally, if you went one over the license count, it wouldn't just stop working for you. It warns you. Yes, another question. Run, Dawn.
Thank you. A question came to my mind regarding the licensing. How is license made with multiple master nodes? For example, scaling.
Yeah.
As far as I saw, you get a license you put into your master, but I only get one license file, or is it just?
Yeah, so the license file actually lives in the console. So that's where it's actually the console machine, the one that's handling the presentation. All of this is where the license lives. If you have multiple masters, that's absolutely fine, because having a scaled out master service, they're all just querying the same ENC, which is the console, which is where the license lives. But like I said, it's not actually going to stop any functionality when if you're somehow out of license, or if you go above the evaluation license. We give away 10 licenses free as evaluation, and there's the whole virtual machine that you can download and just use as a sandbox and check out the new features every time we release and things like that. So it's not a problem if you want to actually scale that out and follow the documentation and add extra masters, etc. That's not going to have any implications on licensing. It's just going to be one extra node being used as consuming an extra license. Any more? Okay.
You can ask questions about anything too. So if there's something that you've always wanted to know how to do in Puppet, he can.
As long as it's
I'll
work-related.
just put him on the spot. So if there's other stuff that wasn't in his demo that you'd like to see demoed, we have time to do that.
Yeah, I've got about probably another 40 minutes of battery on my Mac. Dawn, is it worth me mentioning about the stuff you've had on the slide, the role?
Yes, please.
Yep. So you might have seen it on the slides earlier on that have been rolling in between the talks. So going back to kind of the beginning of my presentation, I'm a TSE, so I'm a technical solutions engineer. And that involves, I work for Puppet in a kind of pre-sales role, for technical role for Puppet Enterprise, okay? And the reason I'm bringing this up again is because we're recruiting someone to do that in the German region, in the DACH region. So if you or anyone would be good at this and is interested in having a look at this, the jobs are available on the website, but I'm of course going to be around in the upcoming break. I'll be around after today as well at the beers and stuff like that if you've got any questions about what it's like. But broadly speaking, I get involved with events like this. I was at VMworld last week, this week even, DevOps days and things like that, where I talk and hang out with community members. I obviously am deeply involved with customers by doing proof of concept work, so there's a lot of hands-on involved in that sense too. And of course, just kind of demoing and helping people adopt Puppet as well. But if you've got any questions about the detail of what it's like, or any of that, or if you know anyone, of course, just please let us know and come and find me during the break. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, I do have just one more quick announcement before we go to the break. I've had a few people ask me about, so there's a lot of beginner talks at Puppet Camps. That's because we tend to have a lot of beginners here. So if you're looking for something a little more advanced, we're actually, right after FOSDEM, we have an event called Configuration Management Camp, which has a Puppet room. And the day after Configuration Management Camp, which is in nearby Ghent, Belgium, we also have a Puppet Contributor Summit. So if you're interested in contributing to Puppet, if you're writing modules, if you're interested in more advanced topics, the Puppet Contributor Summit and the Configuration Management Camp are really good options to get that. So if you're looking for something more, those are good. And they'll be rotating on the slides during the break, so I have URLs and everything. But if you go to the community section of the Puppet Labs website and go to contributor events, you'll see some of the more advanced events that we do.